Welcome back to the program. It looks like there's an increasing likelihood that the Parliament will pass tougher misinformation laws on social media companies. Let's get some reaction with Liberal member for Casey, Aaron Violi. Aaron, appreciate it as always. It looks like there is bipartisanship now that the social media companies simply aren't doing enough in the wake of those terrible attacks in Sydney. They just don't seem to have any sense of their social responsibility or social licence, Aaron.
Hey, Kieran, great to be with you. It was very disappointing to see Elon Musk's comments. Yes, they're a global company, but they do need to follow Australian laws. And as Peter Dutton has said, we'll work constructively with the government on looking at some options to make sure that certain standards are held. We do need to be careful. Obviously, the current misinformation and disinformation bill is one that the coalition doesn't support. A scenario where anything a government says cannot be misinformation or disinformation, and how that's determined is important. So the detail will be important, but we saw those videos when the E-Safety Commissioner, we should be clear, like the E-Safety Commissioner was just asking for the video of the attack to be taken down. So people's free speech in that example wasn't being compromised. People could still comment on it, but when the E-Safety Commissioner asks a platform to take a disturbing video down, well, they really should follow that.
Indeed, it's not just the misinformation; it's the violence as well, and it's got all sorts of ramifications, whether it be for kids or other risks involving our social cohesion and trying to protect a bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as a really simple first principle, you as a media organisation, every media organisation has certain responsibilities, requirements and standards on what you can show and what you can't. And I mean, really simply, like certain movies can't be shown at certain times on TV, and we should have some level of standards in social media. Now, I also think, and to be clear, this is a personal opinion, not a coalition position, but I also think there's a conversation we should have around social media and actually making sure that if you have a profile, you should be identified as who you are with your real name and your real age. And I think that stops a lot of young people getting access, but also myself, many people in politics and in the media have seen the sewer that can sometimes be social media. And if people's real name and identity is there, that might limit some of that. So I think that's part of the conversation we should have around social media, when harnessed correctly, is a real asset for society and for the community, but it can go the other way. And we've got to find that balance of allowing free speech, but making sure people and standards are also protected.
Yeah, a bit of civility it would go a long way. Let's look at the Prime Minister heading to Papua New Guinea this afternoon and going to be walking the Kokoda track along with his PNG counterpart, James Marape. Do you think this is a good idea and an appropriate way to honour our fallen diggers and the relationship between Australia and PNG?
Yeah, I think it is, and it's quite an important and Anzac Day is a special time for our country, and it's important we recognise PNG and the work they have done in partnership with Australia over many years, and particularly Kokoda, and it's got a special place in Australians' hearts. I haven't been there. It's somewhere I'd like to go, so I'm a little bit jealous of the PM this week, but I'm sure he'll enjoy that. I've had friends and family, and even a young man called Riley who went to Kokoda to walk that as part of a scholarship put together by the Lilydale RSL in my community. And Riley talked about, as a young man, how that trip was transformational. So many Australians are making that trek to pay tribute to those that gave the ultimate sacrifice. It shows how important the relationship with Papua New Guinea is to all Australians. So I wish the Prime Minister well on that. I've heard it's quite arduous, so hopefully he's okay. But as we move to Anzac Day, it's so important we remember and pay respect in many different ways, including Anzac Day services that I'm looking forward to in my community, to those that gave the ultimate sacrifice so we can have the freedoms that we're so lucky to enjoy today.
100%. And just finally, on the budget's coming up, the government's putting a really big focus on the future made in Australia. The news poll today suggests it's quite a popular idea, Aaron.
Yeah, I read that with interest, and I mean, what it shows is that the Australian people are looking for action. I've got some deep concerns around this policy. I mean, we've seen the US with the inflation, ironically called the Inflation Reduction Act. Many economic commentators are connecting that spend with the uptick in inflation we're seeing in the US. So there is a real question mark around whether this policy is actually going to drive inflation. The concern also I have is when governments pick winners or try to pick winners, historically we don't quite get it right as governments, and when you've got a Prime Minister, a Treasurer and a Finance Minister who haven't not spent a day working in business, they've spent their whole careers in and around politics, I think there's rightly a question about whether they're going to pick the right winners for the Australian people. What we need to do is create an environment where all businesses can benefit. A rising tide lifts all boats. Remove regulation. Make sure that our tax system is as efficient as possible. Drive productivity up so every business, whether it's a small business in my community or a large multinational, can prosper. And I think that's where the focus should be. Getting productivity to where it needs to be, getting economic growth to continue to grow. History says that when governments pick winners, they drive inefficiencies. Productivity Commissioner said that just last week. So a lot to play out. We'll look at the detail when we're back in Parliament in a few weeks.
Aaron Violi, member for Casey, thanks. Talk to you soon. Let's go live now to the Shadow Treasurer.